Hello, and welcome to the 2019 Legal Assistance for Victims Program Grant. I have a disclaimer for you. The free information we provide in this webcast is based on our interpretation of the grant announcement. The viewer, you, is advised that the publicly published grant announcement and the funding agency are the final authority on this subject grant. I would love to tell you a bit about myself. I am your presenter. My name is Sarita Gibbons. I am the owner for Comprehensive Grants Management. I have been providing successful grant writing services for clients nationwide for almost 12 years with a successful 65% average grant writing success rate. My hobbies are reading, painting, keyboarding, and gardening. I have provided our company website URL for you to visit us. You can see a bit about our grant writing team. We have vlogs and blogs and articles, and you can also see the grant writing successes that we have had for your community partners nationwide. I highly encourage you to visit our website. Today's webcast will be about the 2019 Legal Assistance for Victim Grant Program. This grant is issued by the Office of Violence Against Women, Department of Justice, and I provided a URL for you where you can find additional grant application information assistance. The funding agency stated that eligible applicants are private nonprofit entities, publicly funded organizations not acting in a governmental capacity, such as a law school, territorial organizations. So territorial organizations are the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, the the Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. And just remember that the purposes of this solicitation is for organizations addressing sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and or stalking within the United States territory. So the organizations that address those specific focus areas that are within the territories, as I previously stated, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and also the Northern Mariana Islands, they are eligible to apply. Also, the Indian tribal government is eligible to apply, including Indian tribal consortiums, as well as Indian tribal organizations. The funding agency stated that eligible applicants should also be a victim service provider, but if you would like to be an eligible applicant for this program, or you would otherwise be an eligible applicant for this program, but you are not a victim service provider, you can partner with a victim service provider, and through partnership with the victim service provider, you can be eligible for this grant. So who is a victim service provider? A victim service provider is a nonprofit, non-governmental, or tribal organization or rape crisis center, including a state or tribal domestic violence or sexual assault coalition that assists or advocates for domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or victim stalking victims, including a domestic violence shelter, faith-based organization, or other organization with a documented history of effective work concerning domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So this is very important. So it can be a domestic violence shelter, faith-based organization, or other organization with a documented history of effective work concerning these focus areas. A victim service provider must provide direct services to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking as one of their primary purposes and have demonstrated a history of effective work in this field. And also, a sexual assault victim service provider is a victim service provider as defined above, but not primarily serves victims of sexual assault. This grant is due January the 31st, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we have less than a month now to prepare your grant application. So definitely get started on your grant applications as soon as possible. This is a very good grant, and if you are interested in pursuing it, you must get started right away. So again, the grant due date is January 31st, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you do not have the time to complete your grant application in-house, that is why Comprehensive Grants Management exists. We are an expert grant writing firm. Our expertise is in successful grant writing and successfully submitting grant applications on time. And we have a team of writers all under one roof that is just waiting for you to put us to work. So please give us a call at 813-949-2877 or send us an email at grants@comprehensivegrants.com and let us know that you are interested in applying for the Legal Assistance for Victims grant and you would like us to complete your grant application package for you, and we will get started right away. The purpose of this grant is intended to increase the availability of civil and criminal legal assistance needed to effectively aid adult and youth victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking by providing these grant funds that may be used to provide direct legal services to victims in legal matters relating to or arising out of that abuse or violence. So this assistance should be provided at minimal or no cost to the victims. The program was also created to provide victim access to appropriately trained legal representation designed to meet the broad spectrum of legal issues survivors encounter. Although protection orders play an important role in victim safety, representation in emergency and non-emergency protection order hearings does not address the depth of legal needs of survivors of sexual assault or domestic violence or dating violence or stalking. So this program supports the provision of holistic legal services, and this is very good for the victims. For example, survivors may also need legal assistance with other legal matters relating to or arising out of the abuse or violence, including family matters such as divorce, child custody or child support matters, immigration issues, administrative agency proceedings, housing assistance, and assistance related to human trafficking. So these types of supportive services are really good. So note that any services provided under this grant program must be linked to legal assistance services in order to be an eligible activity. The funding agency provided 3 priority areas that applicants must take special consideration of because the funding agency stated that OVW is interested in supporting the priority areas identified below. Applications proposing activities in the following areas will be given special consideration. So when you apply and the funding agency is reviewing your grant application, do you want to be given special consideration? Well, if you do, definitely make sure to include these priority areas in your grant application. So make sure that you propose these services. The first is to reduce violent crime against women and promote victim safety. So please endeavor to integrate this priority area in your program. Also, they want to see the programs increase the response to victims of human trafficking. So again, please endeavor to incorporate components of increasing the response to victims of human trafficking in your grant applications. Also, the funding agency wants to see an increased efforts to combat stalking. So again, please make sure that you address the increase of combating stalking in your grant application so that you can be given this special consideration. The funding agency has provided some out-of-scope activities. So out-of-scope activities are activities that they're saying are not eligible for these grant funds. So you cannot use grant funding that you win from this grant to pay for these types of services or activities. The first is research projects. So this is not a research grant. And they do not want you to use the grant funding to pay for research projects. This does not include program assessments conducted only for internal improvement purposes, but they do not want any research projects to be funded by this grant. Representation in tort cases, that is the second one. So even though this grant will provide funding for the awardees to provide direct legal assistance, not for representation in tort cases. Number 3 is child sexual abuse cases involving victims under the age of 11. So they do not want to use the grant funding to provide assistance for child sexual abuse cases where the victim is under the age of 11. Number 4 is cases involving the child protection system unless the child dependency hearing involves allegations relating to or arising out of abuse of the client rather than abuse of the child. Number 5 is criminal representation of victim charged with crimes. Number 6 is support of law reform initiatives, including but not limited to litigation. Number 7 is providing general training and or technical assistance to agencies that are not formal or informal LAV, legal assistance for violence grant program project partners. Number 8 is cases involving deferred action for childhood arrivals. Number 9 is funds for victim assistance support unrelated to the provision of legal assistance or legal advocacy, such as transitional housing assistance, therapeutic counseling, or rental assistance. So if these supportive services are not directly related to the provision of legal assistance for the purposes of the focus areas of this program, then you cannot provide these additional supportive services because it has to relate to direct legal assistance that is being provided for the participants for this grant program. The period of performance for this grant, the estimated project start date is October the 1st, 2019, and the estimated project end date is October the 1st, 2022. The funding agency stated that the estimated number of awarded applicants will be 54, and this is actually really good. This is a really good number of estimated number of awarded applicants. So definitely make sure that you get your applications in the hands of the funding agency so that you can have an opportunity to win one of these grant awards. This program has no match or cost sharing requirement, and this is also really good news because to get a hold of match and sufficient match to meet the match requirement is an additional labor burden that if an applicant does not have to have that additional labor burden, then it is really good news for that applicant, which it's good news for you because there is no match requirement for this grant application. The grant award amount ranges between $600,000 to $800,000. So for new and continuing LAV grant program applicants that are proposing to provide legal services primarily to victims of domestic violence or to provide less than 80% of the project's legal services to victims of sexual assault, they may request up to $600,000 for the entire 36 months. On the other hand, for new and continuation LAV grant program applicants that are submitted by sexual assault victim service providers that are proposing to provide 80% or more of the project's legal services to victims of sexual assault beyond intimate partner sexual assault may request up to $800,000 for the entire 36-month grant project. So make sure that you calculate if you are up to the over the 80% or below that 80% so that you can know what your cap is. If you're capped at the 600,000 or you can request up to the 800,000. Here are some eligible program expenses for you to consider when you are creating your grant budget. So again, this grant provides for direct legal services. So you can spend a portion of the grant funding on direct legal services. You can also spend a portion of the grant funding on advocacy as long as the advocate is providing services related to the legal assistance. You can also spend a portion of the grant funding on safety planning, also court accompaniment, also preparation for court appearances, and also expenses associated with assistance with obtaining resources such as housing, employment, and childcare, among other types of supportive services that these participants would need. But remember, the services must be directly related to legal assistance being provided under this program. Your grant budget request can include the listed category of expenses. One of the first category is the personnel expenses, and that is your staff salaries. So the staff that you will need to assist you to successfully manage and operate this grant, you can obligate their annual salary or a portion of their annual salary for this grant. You can allocate budgeting for those expenses from this grant budget. Another expense is fringe benefits. Another expense is travel costs. And that would include long distance and short distance travel. Another category of expense is equipment, and that is any equipment that you deem necessary to assist you to successfully operate this grant program. You can request for it out of this grant budget, out of this grant funding. Also, you can request supplies. All the supplies that you will need to assist you to successfully operate this grant, you can request it. Also, you can request contractual expenses, and that would be any third-party provider that is better able to operate a certain activity for you. You can outsource it to them. And this is a great way for you to compensate your community partners for services that they provide to you, is to make sure that you allocate funding for their services. And so you can pay for their services as long as it is an eligible expense under this grant program. You can allocate money towards outsourcing that aspect of the grant to them. Also, other expenses that you deem necessary for this grant, you can obligate as long as it's an eligible expense. Likewise, for direct costs, as long as it's an eligible expense, you can allocate funding for it. Indirect costs, if you have a indirect cost rate agreement that has already been previously federally negotiated, you can allocate up to that percentage in your grant budget for indirect costs. If you do not already have an indirect cost rate agreement that is formal, then you can request up to 10%, which is the statutory legal rate of the 10% de minimis indirect cost rate. So these are your categories of expenses. Please ensure that your budget is concise, justifiable, and reasonable, and is definitely targeted towards successfully operating this grant. In the famous words of Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is the spirit in which this grant is being given or made available to the eligible applicants, where legal assistance and supportive services can be offered to the participants who need it the most. Now it's decision time, and I have some questions that will aid you in making a decision to see if you would like to apply for this grant. So one of the questions is, are you eligible for this grant? So remember that a lead applicant that is not a domestic violence or sexual assault victim service provider is required to enter into a collaborative working relationship with a sexual assault or domestic violence victim service provider in the community to be served as outlined in a memorandum of understanding. So if you are not yourself a victim service provider, you must enter into a MOU with a victim service provider in order to be eligible for this grant. So, are you eligible for this grant? The next question is, do you have a need for this grant? And I believe every community does have a need for this grant. The third question is, do you want to apply for this grant? So the grant due date is January the 31st. And you may be thinking that time is prohibiting you from applying for this grant, but please do not think that, because that is why our firm exists, to assist in a short period of time to assist clients across the country to apply for grants that they're eligible for and they have a need for. So if you've answered yes to these questions, congratulations, because you are one step closer to applying for up to $800,000. If you would like to apply for this grant, but you do not want to do this grant in-house, or you do not have the resources such as the time, the expertise, or the personnel in-house to do this grant, That is why Comprehensive Grants Management exists. We are a full-time, full-year grant writing firm with an average 65% success rate, and we work with clients nationwide to complete and submit their grant applications. So please give us a call so that we can get started on your grant application for you. Our number is 813-949-2877, or you can send us an email at grants@comprehensivegrants.com and let us know that you would like us to write your grant application for you. If you have decided to do this grant in-house, we wish you the very best, and it would be most helpful for you to give us a call or send us an email or leave a comment on this post on one of our social media pages, letting us know how this webcast did assist you. We would be most happy to hear your feedback and to interact with you and to see what aspects of this webcast did help you to complete your grant application. However, if you do need assistance, please give us a call or send us an email and we will get started on your grant application right away. This is a reminder for you that the due date is January the 31st, 2019, so time is very much of the essence to get started. I would like to tell you thank you so very much for spending this time with me to go over the legal assistance for victims grant. It was my pleasure to present this webcast to you, and I look forward to spending the time with you again in my next webcast.